Hello, here we are with Sarah Wheatley from We've Knit It. Thank you for inviting me, Sarah.
It's a pleasure.
This is fascinating. Tell me what you're doing.
So, in my hands I have fibre. So once a year the sheep gets the haircut, doesn't hurt them, it's done for welfare reasons. And then you wash it and brush it, called carding. And the reason you do that is just to get rid of any sorts of leaves, twigs. Poo and urine is all on the fleece. And then once it's carded, can you see that the fibres, they pull and they've got beautiful alignment. And so what you actually spin is something like that. And all that spinning is you're twisting it. So you're taking something soft and fluffy, and then by simply twisting, it gives it strength. And that's the basis of yarn. So the twist, so my fingers are actually stopping the twist from coming up. So I am not, lots of people think that it's you that twists and manipulates it, but the twist is happening by the action of the wheel. And I'm just controlling it, because if you don't control the twist and it goes all the way up, your yarn gets over twisted and it is unusable. And again, it doesn't matter if it breaks, because it's the twist that creates the yarn. So when you actually learn how to spin yarn, it can be any colour, any thickness, any length. The possibilities are endless, and I find that fascinating. So you are in complete control from the very beginning. So at the minute, this is one ply. You can, and I have knitted with this, but can you see that it's trying to spring back? So what you then do is ply it against itself to become what most people would know as wool and yarn. So this is an Ashford traditional spinning wheel. It's my first ever wheel that I've owned, and each bit of it was painted a different colour, because I could never understand why everyone's spinning wheels were boring wood colours. And this wheel has been all over the country with me to festivals, teaching, all sorts of things. And I can't bear to sell it. She did have a name, and I tried to remember it the other day, and I can't, because I name my cars and equipment. I love the noise that my wheel makes. It's the repetitiveness. Yeah, when I first had it, I tried everything I could to get rid of the sound. But then I realised it's just part and parcel of it, and just embrace it. And it also helps me know that I'm spinning at the same speed when I come to plying the yarn. So I enjoy learning. It's the heritage skills, so I won't ever take anything away from this is a skill, and it's a skill that needs to be kept happening and passed down. And I suppose whilst I'm spinning, I'm then thinking. I don't actually think about what I then do with this particular yarn. As it is spinning, I think, ooh, that looks nice. What if I was to say, add a bit of red in there, or put some locks in? So my problem as a spinner is having the patience to spin a whole bobbin without wanting to sort of suddenly make it thicker or change it. I have spun wiring before, fairy lights. We did a thing at Belper Museum, but it's all to do with if someone tells me I can't, or you can't possibly do that, it's the obnoxious side of me. I can and I will, and watch me. I get my fibre from two places. I get raw fleece, so I deal with farmers all over the country. I'm trying to specialise in Derbyshire fleece. I have some beautiful Leicester Longwool fleece that I've had for years now from a young girl's flock at Brinsley. And I skirt them, I wash them, and I dye them. I'll show you some in a minute. And I love the traceability. I love that I can tell people this is from up the road. I am interested in colour. I don't write the technical things down. I don't measure my dye. I dye with the use of old weaning teaspoons, those lovely cowpole things, and jam jars. and I mix the dye up in a way that my teacher at the Royal College of Art, the what were they called, the technician, would be mortified, because we did weigh everything out. It was so precise. I would chuck a little bit in, I might sprinkle a bit, but what fascinates me is colour. So this one is just one colour. I think it's called caramel.
Really?
So it's the way that the colour splits. Now, I have no control over this. Dyeing is very dependent on humidity, temperature, all sorts of things. So sometimes no two could be the same. But I will start off with a white one like this. I'll pop it in my dye pot and I dye them. Lovely. And you begin to see where the colour was next to each other. So in the dye pot, I will actually pour the liquid dye in there,
right,
and then watch as it separates. This you then spin. It then can be crocheted or knitted or woven, whatever you want, into things like that. So that is a crown with hand spun wool. So it's unique. No two are ever the same. This was a particular colourway that we did for a gentleman that wanted some slipper boots. I think we called it Tiger. And again, the hand spinning, well, in my opinion, it's the hand spinning that makes it look beautiful. But this Leicester long wool, so it starts off white, and then because of the way I dye, so in this particular dye pot, I put yellow and red. And look at the way that the colour splits. And you just get these beautiful things that is a work of art on its own. So I take this, I dye it in the same way as I do the fleece. So that's it as a big ball, and you can buy it as a big ball or as 100 grams. It's not the same one, but that's a different colourway that I've then knitted.
That's just amazing.
So that's how the colours go.
Wow.
Now, depending if you're a knitter, it's knitted this way. And depending on how many stitches you have, the stripe does different things. So the more stitches, the more colour pooling you get. Whereas when there's less stitches, it's a bit more stripy. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was inspiration. In the fashion and textile industry and crafts, there's lots of copying and things. It's really hard. You can take it as a compliment, or it can annoy the heck out of you. But a nice way that my mum had me thinking was it's a compliment, and you know that you can then design the next thing. I don't just come up with ideas. My ideas are from, I've got a textile degree. I was very lucky to go to the Bristol UE and did a fashion and textile degree. The first year I got to do fashion and textiles and knew very early on fashion wasn't for me. I won't use a ruler, I won't measure, I'm their worst nightmare. I had wanted to do architecture until I realised I really can't, I'm not a straight line person. So textiles is freeing for me. I like texture, I like colour, I like repeats. So I went to Belper School, and this is a sketchbook from '95. This was my GCSE. I can't remember what it was called, design technology or something. But then you fast forward some years to Bristol, and my sketchbooks all of a sudden get a lot more textured and interesting and less flat. And you can see where the ideas come from. So a good one, I have got an ongoing fascination with rust and texture. This was back in 98 or 99 when they allowed me to go into a scrapyard, and I managed to climb up onto cars that were parked there. I'll show you that one. Oh, you would never be allowed to do that now with health and safety, but I loved the repetitive pattern, the textures of the rust. As you can see, that has disintegrated altogether. That led to sort of a fascination with brickwork. And again, the repetition. And you can see these are buildings around Bristol. And I began to play and looking at brickwork and repetition. you do bits and textures and colour inspiration and structure. Now from this, you will then produce a finished piece of work. You can't do that without doing the legwork. And that's where I think copying comes from, because from this one page, there's so many different design ideas. So if someone chooses to copy, fine. You haven't got the inspiration and the design capability to then make the next thing. And this was the start of my fascination with wire knitting. And I realised by mixing it with different things, so this is just wire and wool. But then I discovered elastic. So this, you can clearly see, relates to the photos of the brick buildings, because you've got the repetitive of the windows. So therefore, if anyone copies it, I've got, this is where it came from, and there's strong links, and I know that I can go on and do other things. But I can't even remember why I mixed elastic with it, but on the knitting machine it knits like that, and then it comes off the machine and the elastic comes together, and you just get these beautiful undulating shapes that change with the sort of elastic. And I created, these were all turned into lamps, the Slug and Lettuce in Bristol, because I discovered if you put light behind knitting, exciting things happen. It illuminates the structure. I don't know if you can see from the glare. So these were all things that, again, happened by accident. They're knitted screws that I've then felted. That's felted knitting that I've cut and sewn together to create all these different structures. That then led on to, I actually worked with a furniture designer in Bristol, and we made a big room divider. So that's fishing line that I developed. So as well as doing wire knitting, I realised that if you did fishing line and then played with a structure, that one's got Derbyshire woolen, but also with silicone. And then I realised I didn't need to use the silicone. I'd created pockets. And from that came this idea.
Sarah, you're a genius. A genius.
But you can see how one thing's linked from the other. I can't just pull that out and create that. That has happened from all this hard work and experimenting. And that, the other thing I did, so it starts off that colour and I dyed it. I shrunk it. It is plastic after all, and I dyed it with heat, and I had this beautiful that it took me ages to knit, and all of a sudden these big pieces shrunk. It doesn't matter, because weirdly I turned them into a bag and I sold it in the shop a couple of years ago, otherwise I'd show you what I did. But I still remember, so professionals, people like me, we still make mistakes. I still felt jumpers. I do things that I know you shouldn't do, but happy accidents happen. And that's how I learn, and that's how I create. I create by playing and experimenting. And sketchbooks, I can't emphasise enough, sketchbooks are how you start. Have a sketchbook next to your bed. Draw something, write something down, observations, play. From playing, you will then get to experiment and create amazing things like that. This is the actual machine that belonged to my mum, and it still works, and I use it today, and I love it. So most of the things I make are made on this machine. So instead of using 2 needles, the needles come out and move back with the help of the carriage. So when people say this is cheating, it isn't, because I'm operating. Nobody says that about a sewing machine. So as you can see, in a short space of time, I've managed to knit that little bit. But just like with the dyeing, as I'm knitting, I'll probably make a mistake or something, a stitch will come off. So if I was to just purposefully ladder this, you then get a completely different effect. And if you have a look now, you get, and that could have been something that happened by accident. I did a whole range of scarves like that. And again, all you do is get rid of one of the stitches and you go from some solid knitting to ladders.
Wow.
So this was my final collection for the Royal College of Art, where I continued with my obsession of bodies. That piece over there, I worked in collaboration with Beckett Primary School in Derby, and it's a multinational school. So it's showing that your body's the same, you might have different skin and different hair. So the children work with me on all the different hair sort of styles. And I signed it at the bottom, almost like a graffiti artist sort of thing. And I created a pillow that you could lie in and be cradled. I wove both myself and my husband naked as the sheet, and then you had blankets. So it was all about being held and being loved, but without the hassle of a person and everything that brought along with it. This was my finger boa. There is I actually wore that on my wedding day. 250 individually knitted wire fingers. And it was just that feeling of being touched and caressed. And that's my late granddad wearing it, but being proud of what his granddaughter was doing, no matter how nuts and mental it sounded. But I like the juxtaposition of the age of him and I just love his knowing smile.